Constitution! Ventura County's own Ronda Kennedy!
For the day. But I am just so hyped when I'm here amongst all my fellow patriots. It just gets my blood going. I just want to just go out and fight, which is what we're doing right now. I mean, look at all these people. I heard Joe Biden had a rally today. It was like 3 people, and I think they were paid. We're a county that bands together. We're a county that votes. We're a county that responds by this level of patriotism, not by the violence that we just experienced on the corner. You know why? Because we have facts. We have facts, we have the Constitution. That's what we rely on. They rely on fake news, Nancy Pelosi and all her little puppets in Congress, like Julia Brownley, who we all know is a Nancy Pelosi puppet. But keeping in the fighting, boxing terms, Julia Brownley is on the ropes. She's terrified of me. She won't come out of her basement. Her and Joe Biden are hiding down there. And I think they take notes. Did anybody see the Ventura County Star article yesterday? Julia Brownley backed out of my 14th debate. I have a debate on the 14th. She backed out of it. We're having one on the 13th, but she backed out of the 14th one, claiming coronavirus, claiming I don't practice social distancing, claiming that she saw me on Rob McCoy's fireside chat and we were close and we were touching each other. Oh my God. So my thing is that, Julia Brownley, you say I'm not following guidelines, but what's guidelines? Guidelines are recommendations, right? Is that a law? No. If you want wearing a mask and social distancing to be a law, then what do? You go to Congress, you're a legislator. In case you didn't know it, Julia Brownley, you're the branch of the government that makes the laws. So what she's trying to do is circumvent the legislators and just say guidelines should be enforced. How can you enforce a guideline? Yes, so let me ask you this, Julia Brownley. The guidelines also say that when you go into a restaurant, you can take your mask off when you're sitting. But they also recommend that you wash your hands each time you take your mask off. Each time you touch your mask, you should wash your hands, right? That's the guideline. No logic at all. It's really stupid. So you touch your mask, then how do you wash your hands so that you can eat without dirty hands? Because you have to wear your mask to go to the restroom. So when you go to the restroom and wash your hands, you come sit down, you take your mask off, by their guidelines, you're supposed to go wash your hands again. It doesn't make any sense. They just use it for their own benefit when they need an excuse. And then the next day, after Scary JB puts out her statement, Joe Biden does the same thing to President Trump. Are they reading a handbook? Do they have their own guidelines on how to duck a debate? I was just so fired up yesterday after her press release. I was like, come out and face me, Julia Brownley, because she doesn't want to be asked the hard questions. Like, why aren't you ever in the district? Nobody knows who she is. I ask people all the time, do you know who your Congress representative is? No. I think it's Julia Brownley. Have you contacted her office? Well, I have, but she never called me back. That's because she's in Santa Monica. That's why. We need jobs and opportunity here in Ventura County. And when I'm elected, I'm going to recruit jobs here. I'm going after SpaceX. I think Ventura County is a prime place for SpaceX to expand. They're looking to expand. They're looking at going to Texas. Governor Nazi Newsom chased SpaceX out of California. When the shutdown happened, they're like, we're out of here. We're not closing. We're going to Texas. So he gave in. So they're on the verge of leaving California, like every other business is running out of here, because California is unaffordable, it's not business friendly, and we need to stop. When you think about the Pledge of Allegiance, we are one nation, indivisible, right? We're not divided. This nation is so divided right now, and they claim that Republicans divide this nation. That's not true. It's Nancy Pelosi and her merry band of idiots that is dividing this nation. And we need to tell them that we're not going to have that by giving them a resounding no on November 3rd. I'm a strict constitutionalist. When they came for our guns during the stay-at-home order, I filed a federal lawsuit that forced them back open. Yes. My opponent likes to always, she's a one-trick pony. You all know that, right? It's the veterans. The veterans, the veterans, the veterans. What has she actually done for the veterans? My dad served in Vietnam. The veterans are always, always my number one priority. But I don't need to run on that because that's a given. It should be a given, right? Why is she running on that? But what she doesn't talk about is she doesn't talk about our active military, our active men and women who are in current service now. She always votes to cut the military budget. They are unsafe. They have unsafe equipment. The accident that happened down in San Diego, that happened because their equipment was defective. Do you know that defense manufacturers have governmental immunity? They have governmental immunity. So they can manufacture defective equipment, kill our soldiers, and just be like, oh, well, we can't be sued. So is that an incentive for them to actually correct the defect? No. And instead of Julia Brownlee being worried about that, I mean, these are kids. The CH-53 helicopter is a dangerous helicopter. It's been killing Marines since the 80s. And the manufacturer knows it, but they don't have to correct it because of the governmental immunity. That should be things that Julia Brownlee should be worried about when it comes to the military, not just saying, oh, I picked up the phone and I called the Veterans Administration and got this person their benefits. But what about everybody else? What about the Veterans Clinic that she so pridefully says that she helped get started and built here, where they have a 2.9 rating? It's horrible, 54 days just to get an orthopedic appointment. Is that how our vets should be treated? Absolutely not. So, I'm a litigator. I would stand up here and talk all day long. But what I'm going to do is something that Julia Brownlee never does. I'm going to open it up to questions. I am an open book. I don't ditch and dodge questions. I answer all hard questions, truthfully. So with that, I'll open it up for questions. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
Have you looked at the 2040 plan? Have you looked at the 2040 plan and how they passed it through and pushed it?
No, the 2040 plan.
That's what they're going to do for renewable energy, get rid of our oil and everything here.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Here.
The 2040 plan is part of a Ventura. What they're doing is, and like they're doing all over California, is they're taking and pushing through electric energy, getting rid of fossil fuel and everything. And it just came out in print September 15th, and it becomes permanent October 15th.
2045.
Right, the 45. What I'm saying is it's all about
Right.
playing it.
They passed that in 2018, the legislature did. So, right, but they, right, but they actually, this is what they do. It's, they sleep on stuff. So they actually passed this in 2018, and my opponent at the time, Jackie Irwin, voted for it. So by 2045, we're all supposed to be electric. So no more gas cars, no more fossil fuels by 2045. And actually, Julia Brownlee did a whole town hall on that, where she asked, I actually got through to ask a question, and my question was, who's gonna be able to afford this stuff? Like, how many people can afford an electric car? Not everybody can afford a Tesla. We live in the real world. We're working Americans. So yes, I will federally block anything that has to convert to all electric by 2045. Any more questions?
What can you do about masks?
About masks?
Yeah.
Well, masks it's a guideline. It's a guideline. It's not enforceable. So I don't wear a mask. I wear a mask around people who are comfortable for me to wear a mask. I don't have COVID. I've never had COVID. Julia Brownlee's been exposed to COVID. She doesn't have COVID. Her staff doesn't have COVID. Nobody has COVID in her camp that was around her. So masks it's a guideline. It's not enforceable. And my question is, has anyone done a study on the long-term effects of wearing a mask? There are increased numbers of Legionnaire's disease and fungal lung infections because of the mask. There's masks being sold at every corner gas station, every 7-Eleven, ordering them online. How do you know that these masks are safe?
Well, they're made in China, so they gotta be.
Exactly. Half of them, the majority of them are made in China. I don't know. China's probably putting fiberglass in our mask. I don't know. I wouldn't trust it. Sure.
Hi, Rhonda. I have a question for you. I'm unfamiliar with your policy. Can you tell me as a voter why I should vote for you?
I'm here. Step one. How long have you been in Ventura County?
Since 2010.
Did you know that Julia Brownlee was your congresswoman?
Yes.
Have you ever contacted Julia Brownlee?
No.
Do you like her policies?
No.
Okay. Well, the difference between her and I is that I will listen to you. I will listen to everybody in CA 26. I'm no one's puppet. If anyone knows me, I have people on both sides of the aisle that are upset with me. One of the things is, I don't know if you remember, does anyone remember the Blue Bowl scandal? Have you heard of the Blue Bowl scandal? Okay, so the Blue Bowl scandal was our Thousand Oaks police chief. There was an event that was being put on to honor police officers and the fallen officers. Julia Brownlee, Jackie Irwin were scheduled to speak, and I got added to the roster on Saturday. That Monday, the organizers got a phone call from Tim Hagel, who was the former police chief of Thousand Oaks. And in that call, Jackie Irwin, who's in Sacramento, called the police chief in Thousand Oaks, complaining that I was added to the roster. How is somebody a Democrat in Sacramento calls a police chief in Thousand Oaks to complain that I was added to the roster because I ran a bloody campaign against her and I was her nemesis? And he listened, and I publicly brought it out. And there were certain people in our party who didn't want me to expose it. But he said, and I'm looking around right now, you know what one of his quotes were that just really pissed me off? He said, "This is not Trump country. There's not a Trump supporter within 200 miles of Ventura County." Yes, that's what he said. And I said, that's not right. And I exposed it. It went national, but I exposed it. And he retired. But the thing is that I'm going to stand up for what's right. I'm going to stand up. I stood up for every Republican, every person out here who wanted to be the political party of their choice. Regardless of what my own party said, I did what was right. And I will always do that. I'm no one's puppet. So whatever's right for Ventura County, that's how I'm going to vote.
So, Ronda, really quick, I just want to say thank you because I have a little daughter, and one of the things that I've seen is where Kamala Harris, she uses her sex and her race as a reason why people should vote for her. And thank you for not doing that. Thank you for actually talking about saying the things that you would stand up for and not using the way you were born as a reason to vote. And I really appreciate that. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Sure.
It's kind of a difficult question.
Sure.
I'm having a big problem with the media. I'm getting older. I've watched media all my life. What we have today is, it's nothing I would have ever dreamed that would have happened. How do you fight them? Is there a way they should be able to be sued? They've broken they break the Constitution every day with their rhetoric. They're poisoning our youth. You know. And so I was wondering if you've had that conversation with other peers of yours to formulate some sort of plan to battle this, because it looks almost impossible to battle.
Right. Yes. So as far as the mainstream media, that's a little more difficult because we do have the Constitution, and one of the misgivings that people have about the Constitution is the Constitution was actually put in place to protect us from the government, not from individual citizens. That's the 13th Amendment is the only one that applies to individual citizens. However, with commercial businesses like Facebook, you guys saw the policy that Facebook changed where they're not allowing political advertising 2 weeks before the election so that people can't put out any misleading information. Well, I see that as they're a publicly traded company, correct? So I would use the law and the Constitution to go after them. So Facebook is a publicly traded company. So anyone that actually owns Facebook stock could file a lawsuit against Facebook, file what's called a derivative action. If you're a shareholder and you're intentionally or you're not complying with your fiduciary duty, or you're as an officer or director, a shareholder can bring a lawsuit. So they're a publicly trading company and they're turning down millions and millions of dollars in advertising. That's going to reduce the dividends of those shareholders, right? All because of somebody else's personal political beliefs. If you wanted to exercise your own personal political beliefs, then you know what? You stay a private company, you don't go public. But now you have a duty to your shareholders, and that's a breach of duty of care. That's a fiduciary duty to your shareholders. And I think we go after them in the courtroom, because that's where battles are being fought currently right now. Like my gun case, it's being fought in the courtroom. And also I think there should be a disclosure. If you're not really reporting the news, you're commentating. It should be a disclosure before your program that these are the opinions of the host and not those, it's not facts. Because they just splice things, they put up what they want to do, they tell half-truths, and there should be disclosure so that people can be informed and make their own decisions. They can go look at the other half they didn't post, like what they do to our president every single day. Yes, sir.
Hi, just want to let you know I'm a retired deputy sheriff, and I love listening to you here. And I do have one question for Rod here.
Sure.
I want to know if you're going to support withholding of federal funds from school districts that teach this racist 1619 project and the critical race theory.
Yes. We should be teaching true history, all history, and we should be teaching the Constitution. I I learned the Constitution in school. We had to memorize the preamble. We had to memorize the Bill of Rights, and not only just memorize it, but what each one meant. And that's something, as an adult, I took to law school with me, is learning and understanding the Constitution, because I knew my rights before I was a lawyer. And I think it's systematically planned to not teach the Constitution so people don't know their own rights, so that they can say a guideline is enforceable, a guideline is a law.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, I got a question.
Sure.
We heard about court packing and the 25th Amendment recently. What is your position on either one of those, or both?
Following the Constitution. First of all, you want to amend the 25th Amendment, you have to amend the Constitution, and it has to be ratified by the states. Not going to happen. That's just a bunch of talk. That's why they don't teach the Constitution. Secondly, the president has the absolute right. What is it? Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, I think it is. But anyway, the president has the absolute right to appoint a Supreme Court justice. Says nothing in the Constitution about waiting until the election. He is the president until January of 2021. He can appoint any Supreme Court justice, any federal judge up until that date. He is the president of the United States, like it or not. In the words of Branson Gray, Donald Trump is your president.
Okay, so the state superintendent, Tony Thurmond, he came out with, they're still going to impose their anti-bias, anti-racism curriculum into our schools. Is there something that you would be able to do as a congresswoman to have a voice for parents? Because of, with that indoctrination, what can we do?
Well, what we should be doing is having school choice. We can pull them out. You guys can teach whatever crap you want to, but we're pulling our kids out and we're sending them somewhere where we're comfortable with. And actually what that does is it actually creates racism. Like the BLM protesters, the rioting and the looting actually strained race relations. It did not help them at all. They're just equivalent to the KKK. They're equal disruptors. It's just one side of the spectrum and the other, but they're all the same. And changing a whole curriculum, I mean, I don't know. I mean, how can you teach somebody what it's like to be black in America? I'm just me. I'm an American. Stop identifying me. I'm an American. And I am so tired. That's right. I am so tired of white liberals trying to tell me that BLM is good for me. I actually have actual arguments that BLM is good for me. No, they help you. Well, excuse me. Hello, black woman in America. You're going to tell me what BLM does for me. They do nothing for me. They do nothing. They stand for nothing. And actually, if you see it, a lot of the protesters and rioters are Antifa. They cover their faces. They're Antifa. They see, black people in a community saying, stop. We don't want this. Because then they do it, and then they blame it on us, and we're like, it wasn't me. It was Antifa. It's these liberals. And so I actually think that those teachings and what they do in school, it actually divides us instead of unites us. And we need to be one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yes. Oh, thank you.
I have contacted Julia Brownlee and I have not heard back a long time ago.
Shocking.
Yeah. So medical freedom is really important to me. Like you said about the military, pharmaceutical companies you cannot sue a pharmaceutical company for a bad reaction. Will you fight against medical mandated vaccinations for COVID?
Yeah, I believe government needs to stay out of your personal medical life. I think that's between you and your doctor, and government, that's not a place for government. Additionally, if you're a for-profit company, I mean, I'm a lawyer. I mean, it's fair game. You put out defective products, you should be able to be litigated against like everybody else. If you went to, you know, a mom and pop store and you bought a defective product from there, they're in the stream of commerce. You could sue them. That's just an everyday store. Just because you are a large for-profit company doesn't mean you get to be exempt from lawsuits. I mean, unless you want to be a charitable organization and give your meds out for free or at a reduced cost. But as long as you're a for-profit company, it should be fair game. No exemptions. Yes.
I just have a question with all these fabulous ideas and everything from the majority of people who agree with. What is your plan to try to get these things through the majority of
I'll repeat the question. So the question is, how do I plan on getting these things through with the majority of Congress right now being blue? Well, what I plan to do is we're going to flip the House, number one, and we're going to keep the Senate. So we need 18 seats across the country to flip the House. We can do it. We're going to start right here in the 26th. And the second thing is that I can work across the aisle. I have no problems with talking to people. I mean, sometimes I'm called the Democrat whisperer because I can communicate and bring them over to our side, at least by reason. Because at the end of the day, I'm like, we're all Americans. We all want the same things. We all want to be happy. We all want to raise our kids in peace. We all want them to get a good education. We want to grow up and have grandchildren. We want our children to stay here with us, not move out of state because it's so unaffordable. When you talk along those lines, we all want the same things. So I'm going to be able to reach across the aisle and actually work to get things done. Because at the end of the day, like I said, we all want the same thing. So that's how I'm going to get things through. I don't think anybody, even on the Democrat side, wants to support pedophiles like SB 145 did here in California. Because I dare them to say that they do. Because what I plan to do is to bring a 14-year-old in and a 24-year-old in, stand them next to each other and say, is it okay for this 24-year-old to have sex with this 14-year-old? You're telling me that this is okay. And they can't say yes. I mean, they better not. I mean, even if they think so, I mean, they'll be crucified if they say that. Especially when it's a child. It's a child. It's disgusting. And that's the kind of stuff they're pushing out, but they're not being called out on it. Because they changed the narrative and not enough people are educated about what goes on in Sacramento. It comes out in its little bits and pieces, and then it just disappears. And when all the media, this should have been reported across the country what California was doing. But there's also a federal sex registration, but you could be prosecuted if you don't register as a sex offender. However, it's up to the states to say who has to register. That's why SB 145 now changes the registration. So I want to make it a federal mandate that you have to, if you commit a sex crime, you have to be registered, federally registered. Because just because you're in California doesn't mean you won't leave and go to Texas. And Texas has no idea that you're a sexual predator because California didn't force you to register. And so by crossing state lines, I think it's a federal issue, and we can push it through federally. Sure.
So I think, we're all mostly here to support, you and our favorite politics, but I think a lot of people don't speak on the moderate or the undecided voter. And I think that's key for bridging the gap between left and the right that has polarized the country in the past, 8-10 years or so. So what can you do for the undecided moderate voter, and how to bring people together? Because at the end of the day, we are the United States of America.
Right. I don't actually think I've said anything today that was polarizing. I mean, I said everything today is what Americans would want. We all want a safe America. We all want jobs and a strong economy. I don't think you could ask anybody in the middle or on the Democrat side and say, hey, should we not bring jobs to California? You don't want jobs in California? They're not going to say yes. If you say, do you want our streets to be safe? They're not going to say no. If you ask them, well, do you want our kids to go to a safe school and be educated? They're not going to say no. If you ask them, do you want racial equality? Do you want to stop the division between the races? They're not going to say no. That's everything I'm talking about right now. These are divisive groups. Just like I talked about BLM, in contrast, it's the KKK and white supremacy. They're the same. They're the same side. One is on one spectrum and one is on the other spectrum, but they're both divisive and they're both ripping America apart. And I can't think of one Democrat or one independent who would disagree with me. Actually, the divisiveness is coming that, like, my opponent is so polarized, and I'm ahead in the polls. I'm beating her because I'm not divisive. I'm not divisive. I can relate. She came out immediately after George Floyd, and condemned the police, the entire police organizations everywhere. That in itself is prejudice. What's the definition of prejudice? Prejudging. She prejudged every single police officer across the country, and she said nothing that David Dorn was brutally shot days after George Floyd by BLM rioters and Antifa, trying to rob a store because they took advantage of the protesting and riot. This man, you can, on video, you see him take his last breath. 70 years old. He dies in the street like a dog while rioters and looters are running around, and Julia Brownlee said nothing about him. She said nothing about Patrick Underwood, the federal officer that was shot up north. Nothing. No condolences. She's inhuman. How can you be human and not feel for these people? This man, you see him literally die, bleeding to death in the streets. And she said nothing. I can't think of any independent or Democrat that would support that. Thank you. Yes. I'm fine.
I don't know where to start with Gavin Newsom. I don't know what's worse. Him releasing prisoners, felons, endangering an entire population of women and children and men. But I was liking you to speak about the lawsuit. There's a restraining order against him, Kevin Kiley and Gallagher. Do you know the lawsuit? And I was hoping,
the Assembly representative, yes.
So we're having hope about this because I think on the 21st of October it's supposed to be heard.
Right. They filed what's called a demur, which is basically a motion to dismiss, and in federal court it'd be motion to dismiss, 12B6 motion. So the state filed a motion to dismiss, a demur, which was denied. So, which means that it's going to move forward to a hearing. That's what's going to happen. So the state lost the first round because it didn't get dismissed at that point. So now it's going on to the next phase, which is going to go to a full hearing, like what happened here with Rob McCoy. Same thing, was a restraining order filed, but except he was the defendant.
Newsom removed the judge.
Sorry?
Newsom removed the judge.
That's right. Remove the judge. You can file a recall petition against any state judge. Like, you can file one right now. Anyone can file the recall petition, just like they did with Gavin Newsom, but it takes a lot less signatures to recall a state judge, especially if they went unopposed. It's less signatures that you need to get them on the ballot, to get them out. Yeah. That doesn't even sound like a Harley. Anything else? Woo woo!
So, it's I think pretty much common knowledge that there's so much corruption in government, and I personally feel that a lot of that stems from the fact that lobbying is legal. It seems to me like lobbying.
Payoffs, legal payoffs?
Yeah, it seems to me like it's nothing more than legalized bribery. I always use the example, if I were to go to Washington, D.C. with $1 million in my pocket and grab a hold of a congressman and pay them to vote the way I want them to vote because there's some bill coming up that's going to affect my business, that would be called bribery, and I would go to prison for that.
Yeah, there's definitely a red light district in Congress. One example is AB5. You guys are familiar with AB5, right? That's the independent contractors where everyone has to be, no more independent contractors are going to be labeled as an employee, which means there's more employee taxes. It puts a huge strain on employers. It puts a huge strain on those people who like to work as independent contractors because of their freedom and their flexibility. So AB5 came into place because of Uber and Lyft. There was the organization, the Uber and Lyft drivers, that said that we should be employees, we should be treated better, blah, 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 blah. So instead of them like collectively using their voice by like every Uber driver, Lyft driver just turns off your app and there's no Uber Lyfts available to get your demands from Uber and Lyft, they basically dragged us into it, and the legislators and got them to vote for AB5, and so now we're all in the same boat. But you know where Uber and Lyft did? They left everybody else behind. So Prop 22 actually they will reverse AB5, but only for Uber and Lyft. Everybody else, we're just screwed. Why? Because they had lobbyists who lobbied and paid all the money to put it on the ballot, but left us behind. And then dupe us into voting for it. So when we vote for Prop 22, we think the average person thinks it's going to reverse AB5, but it will reverse AB5, but only for those special interest groups, Uber and Lyft, because they had the lobbyist. How does incumbents actually challenge career politicians when they start off with a war chest like Nancy Pelosi with $10 million in it? How is that competitive? It's not. They should have to start from zero like everybody else who challenges them. That's why we have career politicians, and I don't think our founding fathers intended for anybody to die in office. I mean, we've had how many? 3 congressional members that died in office too just in the last year. That's ridiculous. Yeah. So. All right. Yes.
Hi, I just want to let you know I love you. Look forward to
Thank
voting
you.
for you.
Even with the Raiders hat, I'm a Packer fan, but that's okay.
So, obviously, we all have a long list of grievances with the governor, but what is your feeling on him and the reparations for slavery?
God.
And is that something that you think we can fight for? Does Julia Brownlee support that?
Julia Brownlee supports anything that's going to pander to a minority vote, but I don't. I don't want reparations. I want opportunity. I want an equal education for my kids, because with that I can make my own way. You can't pass down a Section 8 voucher or a welfare check. We need generational wealth that we can pass down to our families, and that's the only thing that is happening is pandering. President Trump actually created opportunity. He created opportunity zones, and whether you know it or not, we have several opportunity zones right here in Ventura County. Why isn't Julia Brownlee working to develop these opportunity zones and take advantage of it? She doesn't, because then the president will take credit. I mean, you have to give him credit. He created the opportunity zones. But there are 3 or 4 opportunity zones right here in Ventura County where we can use that money and the tax incentives to actually expand and create businesses, create jobs, but she won't utilize and take advantage of that because the president created it. And she'd be utilizing something that the president did, and she'll have to give him credit for it. And so she's selling you out, and all of us out, for her own political agenda. She should do what's best for what's here in CA 26. Yeah. I'm fine. How are you?
Good. This is kind of a question at a more micro level.
Okay.
Ventura County. I'm on the fence about Measure E. A Measure E in Ventura County is going to raise our sales tax. I'm all for supporting our fire departments, our police departments, and all their equipment. But why does it take raising taxes to fund our local fire departments and our police departments? And how do you feel about that? This Measure E, you're a Ventura County resident, right?
Mhm.
So Measure E is on your ballot.
Mhm.
So how do you feel about that? Because I'm really on the fence. I have great friends.
We have enough money, and there's enough federal money, and there's there's grants that they can get from the feds. But again, you have to go to the feds to do it. I mean, and if you're not having a good relationship because you're constantly bashing the president and bashing everybody in Congress and on the right side of the aisle, it's kind of hard to go and ask for stuff. But that's just that is just an excuse to raise taxes. There's money. You can
9.25.
You can
9.25.
yes,
They're going
you
to raise it to.
yeah, you can reallocate. There's federal money available. There's federal grant money available specifically for law enforcement, specifically for fire and rescue. Go get that money first. Don't put the burden on Ventura County. Right. Spread it around. No, I'm not. I'm not voting to raise taxes. We're hurting enough as it is.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Yes. Was that it? Okay. Well, thank you guys. Thanks for coming out and spending your Saturday with me. My door is always open. If you have questions you didn't get to answer here, please contact my office. I don't run from people. I will stand here and answer all the hard questions. I dare Julia Brownlee to do the same thing.